rain hammered the cemetery canopy as Lena clutched the umbrella that did nothing to steady her trembling. She wasn't just burying her father, she was watching the man she loved walk away from her without a word. Adrian Knight, billionaire heir with a gaze that used to soften at the sight of her, now avoided her like a stranger. And as he stepped into his waiting limousine, the world tilted. Lena tried calling his name, but her voice vanished in the storm. He didn't turn back. Not once. She had no idea that by the time she collapsed beside her father's grave, 2 lives were already growing inside her. Lives Adrian might never know existed. And miles away, a young black waitress named Mara wiped down an empty cafe table, unaware that fate was pulling her straight into their unraveling world. What none of them knew was that one buried truth would bring them all crashing together. Lena never imagined silence could feel so loud. But the moment she stepped back into the penthouse after the funeral, the quiet pressed against her chest like a weight she couldn't lift. Adrian's jacket still hung on the hook by the door, his cologne faint in the air, as if he had only stepped out for a moment. For a heartbeat, she almost called his name, almost believed he'd answer with that soft, distracted, "Lena?" he always used when he was working late. But the rooms stayed still, empty, watching her. She set her keys down and waited, 5 minutes, then 10, telling herself he might walk in any second, explaining everything with tired eyes and a rushed apology about the board meeting he couldn't leave. But evening slipped toward night, and the only thing that arrived was the cold. She wrapped her arms around herself, not sure if she was shivering from the draft or the memory of the way he'd avoided her gaze at the cemetery. A single glance she kept replaying, trying to convince herself she'd imagined the distance in it. The days after the funeral blurred into each other. One morning, she stood in the kitchen reheating the same cup of untouched coffee, scrolling through her phone, staring at the messages she'd sent. "Where are you? Can we talk? I need you. Please." All marked as delivered. None answered. She typed another one, deleted it, then typed again. When she finally hit send, her hands felt numb. Hours passed with no reply. She told herself grief could twist anyone, that losing her father had drained the color from her world, and maybe it had done the same to Adrian. But every night, as she lay awake in the too large bed they once shared, she couldn't shake the dread that something else was unraveling. By the 3rd week, she stopped checking the elevator every time it dinged. The hope hurt too much. She forced herself into a routine. Wake up, shower, step over the stack of unopened mail, and breathe through the rising panic. But even that routine crumbled the morning the nausea began. It hit without warning, a churn in her stomach, so sharp she barely made it to the bathroom. When it happened again the next day, and again after that, she ran water over her trembling hands and whispered, "Please, not now." Because she already knew what it might mean, and the thought alone made her knees weaken. She sat in the doctor's office listening to the steady hum of the air conditioner, staring at the framed photos of smiling babies on the wall. When the doctor stepped in with the results, her voice softened instantly. "Congratulations, Lena. You're pregnant." The words seemed to float in the air, surreal, impossible. Lena blinked, trying to absorb them. "Are you sure?" she whispered. The doctor nodded. "Very sure." A quiet laugh slipped out of Lena, half joy, half disbelief, and then the tears came. Hot, unsteady, unstoppable. She pressed her hand to her abdomen as if she could already feel the small heartbeat inside. A child. Their child. And for the first time in weeks, a fragile spark lit inside her chest. He would want to know. He had to. She left the clinic with a trembling kind of hope, one she protected with both hands as she walked through the city. The afternoon sun warmed her face and she imagined telling Adrian, imagined his shock melting into joy as he pulled her close. But the closer she got to Knight Industries, the sleek glass tower where he spent most of his waking hours, the more her stomach twisted. Still, she straightened her shoulders and walked through the revolving doors, holding on to the belief that this moment might save them. Security checked her ID, then hesitated. The guard tapped his earpiece, frowned, and finally said, "I'm sorry, Ms. Hayes. You're not on the approved visitor list." Lena felt her breath hitch. "I'm his partner. Adrian knows me." The guard's expression didn't change. "I've been instructed not to allow you inside." The words landed like stones inside her stomach. She stepped back, confused, watching other employees breeze in past her, their badges flashing green. As she stood there, trying not to crumble, two executives walked by mid-conversation. "He left yesterday," one said. "Last minute. Supposed to be an extended trip. Europe first, then Dubai." Lena froze. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Extended trip? No message, no explanation, nothing. Outside, the sky had darkened, a wind sweeping across the plaza with a chill that made her wrap her arms around herself again. She sank onto a bench, the sound of traffic blurring as her mind raced through every moment of the past month. The silence, the distance, the cold look at the funeral. All of it pointed to an answer she didn't want to accept. She pressed a hand over her abdomen again, feeling the sting of betrayal twist deeper. "Why, Adrian?" she whispered into the wind. "What did I do?" Across the city, in a cramped cafe that smelled of burnt espresso and cinnamon, Mara wiped down tables with the practiced exhaustion of someone who had been working since dawn. She hummed softly under her breath, glancing at the tip jar with a hopeful sigh. Every shift brought her a little closer to her dream of starting college. Every extra dollar felt like a seed she refused to let die. She didn't know that somewhere out there, a stranger was sitting alone on a cold bench outside a skyscraper, holding her stomach and fighting tears. She didn't know that soon, their paths would collide in ways neither could foresee. Back at the plaza, Lena finally stood. Her grief was no longer soft. It had sharpened into something heavy, something that pulled her forward instead of weighing her down. She didn't know what truth Adrian was hiding, or why he had vanished from her life as if she were nothing more than a forgotten appointment. But she knew she couldn't stay in the dark any longer. She walked away from the building, each step steadier than the one before, unaware that the path she was choosing would lead her to answers she wasn't ready to face, and to people who would change her life forever. Lena didn't plan on confronting anyone that morning. She woke to the faint ache behind her ribs, the kind that came from sleeping too little and thinking too much, and told herself she'd spend the day resting. But the moment she caught her reflection, hollow eyes, loose sweater hiding the smallest curve of her stomach, something inside her snapped. She needed answers, or at least the dignity of hearing the truth from someone's mouth instead of whispers in a lobby. That urgency carried her through a cab ride across the city, past iron gates and manicured hedges, straight to the front door of the Knight family estate. The housekeeper answered first, stiff as polished wood, but when Lena said Adrian's name, she was ushered inside with the kind of reluctant courtesy reserved for guests who weren't guests anymore. The air smelled of lavender polish and expensive disdain. Crystal clinked somewhere deeper in the house, followed by a voice that always made Lena's spine stiffen. "Send her in." Adrian's mother sat in a sunlit sitting room, legs crossed elegantly, a porcelain teacup balanced between two immaculate fingers. She looked Lena over the way a jeweler inspects a stone, searching for flaws she already believed were there. "You look tired," she said, not as concern but as accusation. Lena ignored the sting. "I need to know where Adrian is." The slightest smile touched the woman's lips. "He's moved on." The sentence landed like a slap. A soft one, perfectly timed, the kind that left no mark but burned just the same. Lena swallowed, her voice tight. "He wouldn't leave without telling me." "Oh, my dear," the older woman murmured, setting her cup down with a delicate clink. "A man like my son learns very quickly what elevates him, and what drags him down. You should preserve what little dignity you have left." The words were smooth, practiced, rehearsed. though the cruelty in them felt freshly sharpened. Lena's hands curled into fists against her sides. For a moment, she considered shouting back, demanding the truth, but the house was too quiet, too watchful. Instead, she forced a breath and turned to leave. That was when she saw it. Papers scattered on a nearby table, half tucked into a binder. Her gaze caught on the word inheritance. Then fraud allegations. Then a file stamped with the Knight family crest. Her heart kicked against her ribs. Something was wrong far beyond heartbreak or cold feet. She stepped closer without thinking, but Adrian's mother moved just as quickly, sliding the folder shut. "This conversation is over," she said, voice clipped. "Goodbye, Lena." Outside, the wind hit her like the world exhaling in her face. She walked until the estate vanished behind tall hedges, but the tension followed her, coiled tight around her breath. If there was a scandal involving Adrian's father's estate, if there were allegations or threats, maybe the coldness in his eyes at the funeral hadn't been indifference. Maybe it had been fear. But that didn't ease the ache inside her, not when she was alone, penniless and carrying children he didn't know existed. While she rode back into the city, halfway across the world, Adrian Knight was leaning over a hotel desk strewn with contracts, his jaw tight from hours of pretending to be fine. His phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, saw the name he'd been avoiding, and looked away like it hurt to breathe. A flash of memory cut through him. 2 men in a dark parking garage, the hiss of a threat in his ear. "Walk away from her, or she won't survive the mess you inherited." He'd thought he could shoulder everything alone. Cut Lena out, protect her by destroying her trust. And maybe it would have worked if guilt hadn't followed him through every airport, into every meeting, invading even his sleep. In those flickers of rest, he still saw her, standing at her father's grave, reaching for him as he walked away, her voice lost in the rising storm. Back home, Lena tried to rebuild a life from the pieces he'd left her. She downgraded to a small apartment with thin walls and a heater that worked only when it felt generous. She picked up small jobs, hostessing at a diner, sorting inventory at a boutique, anything that kept her afloat. She told no one she was expecting. Loose sweaters, oversized coats, strategic scarves, each one a barrier between her and the questions she wasn't ready to answer. But hiding only worked until her body stopped cooperating. One evening, while sweeping the back room at the boutique, a wave of dizziness surged through her. Her vision blurred. She steadied herself on a shelf and whispered, "Not now. Please." Her heart thudded too fast. The air felt thick and heavy. She stumbled outside, desperate for cool air, but the moment she reached the sidewalk, her knees buckled. She barely noticed the warm glow of the cafe nearby, or the scent of coffee drifting through its open door. She heard only the rush of her pulse, the cracking pavement beneath her, and then a voice. Hey, are you okay?" Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. The world spun, then steadied just enough for her to see a young woman kneeling beside her. Warm brown eyes, a worried crease between her brows, an apron smudged with flour and cinnamon. "Can you hear me?" the woman asked. "Yes, I just—" Lena blinked hard, trying to pull herself together. "I'm fine. I think I just stood up too fast." "That wasn't standing up too fast," the woman said softly. "You almost collapsed." Lena tried to sit, but the woman, Mara, according to her name tag, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Let's get you inside. Please." Inside the cafe, the warmth seeped into Lena's cold fingers. Mara brought her water, then sat across from her, studying her with a level of concern Lena wasn't used to receiving. "You scared me out there," Mara said. "Do you get dizzy often?" Lena hesitated. Admitting too much felt dangerous, yet lying seemed pointless. "Lately, yes." Mara nodded slowly, as if she already suspected more. "Look, you don't have to tell me anything, but you shouldn't be alone if this keeps happening." The kindness in her voice was almost enough to make Lena cry. She swallowed the feeling. I'm just tired. It's been a hard month. Mara smiled, small and understanding. I can tell. Hard months leave a mark. She didn't push. She didn't pry. She just kept her voice steady, warm, the way someone speaks to a stranger they instinctively want to protect. Lena touched her abdomen beneath the table, hidden by her sweater, and whispered, Thank you. Really? Any time, Mara said. Come back if you ever need a place to breathe. When Lena finally stepped outside again, the night air felt softer than before. She walked slowly, one hand still pressed to her stomach, her mind tangled with new fear and new gratitude. She didn't know what was coming next. But she knew one thing for certain. Kindness from a stranger felt more stabilizing than any promise Adrian had left her with. And somewhere deep inside her uncertainty, a quiet thread began to form, one that would soon pull her back to that same cafe and to Mara, whose compassion was about to reshape the direction of her life. Mara had barely finished wiping the table when she saw Lena sway again. It was the kind of movement that didn't look like simple dizziness. It looked like someone whose entire world had been shaking long before her body gave out. Mara stepped forward instinctively, steady hands guiding Lena back into the cafe a second time, the bell above the door chiming softly as if announcing a secret moment neither woman yet understood. Sit, Mara murmured, pulling out a chair. Let me get you something warm. Lena didn't argue. She looked too tired to fight anything. The cafe lights glowed softly above them, casting a golden haze over the wooden tables and the chalkboard menu smudged with earlier fingerprints. When Mara returned with a bowl of soup and a piece of toast, Lena whispered, You don't have to do this. But the way she wrapped her fingers around the warm bowl told a different story. Mara slid into the seat across from her, studying the shadows beneath Lena's eyes. How far along are you? She asked gently. Lena stiffened. How did you know? Mara offered a small smile. My aunt had 3 kids. I've seen that kind of exhaustion before. Then her voice softened even further. You're not eating enough, and you almost fainted twice. For a moment, Lena tried to hold herself together, tried to swallow the lump rising in her throat, but something about Mara's calm presence unbraided the tightness in her chest. She set the spoon down, her hand trembling. I can't do this alone. The words came out barely audible. The father left. He just left. Mara leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes steady. No goodbye? No explanation. Lena shook her head, tears slipping down despite her attempt to blink them away. One day, he was everything. The next, he was gone. The cafe was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator behind the counter. Mara reached for a napkin and placed it gently in front of her. You don't have to tell me the details, she said, but you're not alone tonight. Those simple words cracked something open in Lena. The loneliness she'd been drowning in, the fear she'd tried to ignore, the belief that no one would care enough to help. She breathed out slowly, as if releasing weeks of held-in pain. Over the next days, Mara kept her word. She invited Lena back for meals when she could, and when Lena admitted she needed work, Mara didn't hesitate. She talked to the cafe manager, persuading him to let Lena help with simple tasks in the back, folding pastry boxes, organizing supplies, things that wouldn't strain her body. Lena tried not to cry the first time she received a small envelope of cash for her contribution. Thank you, she whispered to Mara as they stepped outside into the cool evening air. You're earning it, Mara replied. Don't diminish yourself. Each morning, Lena woke with a little more stability. The panic didn't choke her as quickly. The world felt less cruel. And Mara became the voice she didn't know she needed. The one who reminded her to drink water, who walked her to her appointments, who sat in waiting rooms reading outdated magazines while Lena listened to the fragile thump of 2 tiny heartbeats. At one visit, when the doctor smiled and said, "Both babies look healthy," Lena's breath caught. Twins. She squeezed Mara's hand, overwhelmed by the magnitude of it. 2 lives, 2 futures, 2 reasons to keep going. Still, shadows lingered. Gaps. Questions that wouldn't let her rest. Those answers found her in the unlikeliest way. One slow afternoon, the cafe filled with well-dressed clients from the financial district. Men and women whose watches cost more than Lena's rent. Mara was refilling cups at a nearby table when she heard one of them hiss, "Have you seen the news about the Knights? The estate scandal?" Another laughed under his breath. "Forged documents, hidden accounts, threats. It's a circus. Adrian Knight should have laid low, but he keeps poking around. Rumor is someone's using leverage against him," a woman added. "Blackmail, maybe. Trying to push him out of the inheritance." "Whatever it is," the first man said, "Knight's been scrambling for months. Poor guy looks haunted." Mara froze, the pot of coffee hovering midair. She recognized that name instantly. Lena had never said it outright, but grief has a way of revealing truth in tone and silence. She returned to the counter slowly, heart thudding, and waited until their shift ended before she spoke. As they stepped into the fading afternoon light, Mara swallowed hard. "Lena, I heard something today, about the Knight family." Lena stopped walking. "What did you hear?" Mara repeated everything, every detail, every rumor, every whispered accusation from the wealthy clients. Lena listened, face pale, eyes sharp with sudden clarity. "Threats," she murmured. "Leverage." Her thoughts scattered in a storm. If Adrian was caught in something dangerous, if someone had warned him to walk away, it twisted the narrative of abandonment into something far more complicated. But even as the pieces shifted, the pain didn't soften, because if he had been protecting her, he had done it by destroying her. Mara watched the turmoil flicker through her expression. "I don't know what it all means," she said gently, "but it doesn't sound simple." Lena sank onto a bench outside, pressing both hands over her growing stomach. Why didn't he tell me? Why didn't he trust me? Mara sat beside her. Fear makes people do the wrong thing, even when they think it's right. She nudged her shoulder lightly. "But you deserve answers, Lena. Real ones, not rumors." For a long moment, Lena stared at the passing cars, the warm glow of sunset drifting across the street. The world felt suspended, like she was standing at the edge of something she couldn't yet see. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," she whispered. Mara's voice was steady. "You are. And if you're not, I'll help you get there." The words settled into Lena like steady footsteps on a shaky bridge. They walked back toward the apartment slowly, the night air cool against their skin. Lena felt something different inside her, something unfamiliar but steady. Hope, maybe, or resolve, or the quiet, beginning of courage. As she reached her door, Lena turned to Mara, her eyes darker, more determined than they had been in months. "I need to know why he left me," she said, "no matter what it costs." Mara nodded, a soft but unwavering promise in her expression. "Then we find out." Lena stepped inside, the light flicking on with a soft buzz, and placed a hand over her belly. The babies kicked, gentle, rhythmic, as if urging her forward. She inhaled, long and slow, then whispered into the quiet room, "I'm coming for the truth." And for the first time since Adrian walked away, she meant it. Lena first saw his face again on a muted television in the corner of a laundromat. She hadn't meant to look up. She was folding tiny onesies, trying to ignore the ache in her back, when the newscaster's gestures drew her eyes. And there he was, Adrian Knight. Thinner, sharper around the edges, the confidence he always carried replaced with something hollow. He was stepping out of an airport terminal, cameras flashing like lightning around him. For a moment, Her breath simply stopped. She moved closer to the screen, one hand resting protectively on her stomach. The caption at the bottom read, "Billionaire returns for charity gala after months abroad." She didn't need more than that. If he was back, if he was willing to be seen, then she deserved to be seen too. Her heart pounded with something that tasted like anger and relief tangled together. She whispered, "You're not running this time." And she meant it. The night of the gala, the city skyline flickered with gold reflections as Lena stood outside the grand hotel where the event was held. Men in tuxedos and women in shimmering gowns streamed past her. She felt underdressed even in the borrowed maternity dress Mara had insisted she wear, soft navy fabric hugging her stomach in a way that made everything impossibly real. Mara was inside already, working the event as part of the catering team, and had texted her one simple message. "He's here." Inside, crystal chandeliers scattered light like broken stars across the ballroom. Soft music floated through the air, the kind meant to distract from the tension simmering beneath wealthy conversations. Lena stepped deeper into the crowd, ignoring the curious glances from strangers who sensed she didn't belong. She scanned the room with a tightening heartbeat. And then she saw him. Adrian stood near a display of auction items, hands clasped behind his back like he was holding himself together. His hair was shorter, his posture rigid, as if he'd spent months bracing for impact. When he turned slightly and his eyes met hers, the world seemed to contract around them. She didn't move at first. Neither did he. His gaze traveled from her face down to her stomach, and for a moment he looked like someone whose lungs had forgotten their purpose. He took one step toward her, shock rippling across his expression. "Lena," he breathed. She felt the name hit her like a physical thing. "Don't say it like you didn't disappear," she shot back, voice low, trembling with restraint. "Don't you dare." He opened his mouth, closed it, then whispered, "You're pregnant." His tone was disbelief wrapped in something heartbreakingly soft. She let the anger blaze through her. "Yes. And you would have known that if you hadn't vanished." Adrian ran a hand over his face, eyes darting around the room as if calculating exits. "We shouldn't talk here." "We're talking now," she said. "You owe me that." Her voice trembled, but not with fear, with fury, with months of unanswered questions, with everything she'd carried alone. He hesitated before turning sharply toward a side corridor. She followed, shoulders tense, the click of her shoes echoing against the marble floor. When the door closed behind them, the music outside softened into a distant hum. Adrian exhaled shakily. "Lena, you need to understand." "No," she cut in. "You need to understand. I begged you for answers. I thought I did something wrong. I thought—" Her voice cracked and she swallowed hard. "I thought you stopped loving me." The confession broke something in him. He reached for her, then stopped halfway like touching her might burn. "I never stopped," he whispered. "Never." "Then why?" Her eyes glistened. "Why did you leave me standing at my father's grave? Why didn't you come home? Why didn't you trust me with the truth?" His jaw tightened. "Because if I stayed, you'd be dead." The words sliced through her anger, leaving a stunned silence in their wake. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "There were threats, Lena. Real ones. People who wanted control of my father's estate. They said if I didn't end things with you, they'd make sure you paid the price." His voice trembled, not with fear, but with guilt. "I thought leaving was the only way to protect you." Lena stared at him, breath caught somewhere between disbelief and devastation. "You thought hurting me was protecting me?" "I thought losing me was better than losing your life," he said. Her hand tightened over her abdomen. "And what about them?" she whispered. "Our babies? Did you protect them too?" He flinched as if struck, eyes dropping to her stomach again. "I didn't know." "Because you didn't stay," she said, her voice cracking. Because you didn't trust me." Before he could respond, a sharp clatter echoed from down the hall. Adrian stiffened instantly. Lena turned too, sensing danger before she understood it. The next seconds unfolded with terrifying speed. A shadow breaking from a maintenance door, a glint of metal in a raised hand, footsteps rushing toward them. Adrian shoved Lena back instinctively. "Get behind me." A shout rang through the corridor. Someone lunged. There was a struggle, grunts, shoes scraping marble, a curse hissed under ragged breath. The attacker swung again, aiming for Adrian's throat, but a voice cut through the chaos. "Lena, down!" Mara. She appeared like instinct, abandoning the tray she'd been carrying, grabbing Lena and shielding her with her own body. They hit the ground together as security agents surged in, tackling the attacker. The weapon clattered loudly, and for a moment everything was nothing but the sound of heavy breathing and pounding fear. When the man was pinned, an officer barked, "Who sent you?" The attacker spat blood onto the floor. Same people who warned him, told him to drop the girl, told him to stay quiet. His gaze flicked toward Adrian, full of contempt. He didn't listen. Lena felt her pulse roar in her ears. Adrian's face drained of color as the truth he'd buried finally surfaced in the ugliest way possible. The officer tightened his grip, but the man kept talking. Messy inheritance. Too much money on the line. She was leverage. He jerked his chin toward Lena. She was the threat they told him to cut loose. Mara's breath caught sharply. Lena's fingers curled into the carpet. And Adrian. Adrian looked like he'd been split open. Every lie he told himself unraveling under the weight of reality. "I tried to keep her safe," he whispered hoarsely, barely audible, "and instead, I put her in more danger." Lena struggled to her feet, Mara steadying her. The corridor felt too bright, too sharp. Adrian stepped toward her with raw devastation in his eyes. "Lena, I'm so sorry." She held up a hand, just enough to stop him. Her voice was steady, but her heart wasn't. "You thought walking away would save me, but it destroyed me instead." He closed his eyes, shoulders trembling as security dragged the attacker away. The music from the ballroom floated faintly through the door again, impossibly normal against the wreckage of truth around them. Lena looked at him, really looked at him, seeing both the man she loved and the consequences of every silent choice he'd made. The danger was real. The love was real. And the wound between them was deeper than either had allowed themselves to admit. She turned toward Mara, who squeezed her hand gently, grounding her. The hallway felt like a crossroads. One path leading back into fear, the other into something unknown. Lena inhaled shakily. "We're not done," she said, voice trembling but resolute. "But I don't know if we can ever go back." Adrian lifted his head, eyes pleading. "Just let me try. Maybe later. Maybe not." Right now, all Lena felt was the weight of everything that had finally come to light. And as she stepped away, unsure of what healing would look like, or if it was even possible, the world around them felt suspended, waiting for a choice none of them were ready to make. Lena didn't open the door the first time Adrian knocked, or the second. She stood in the hallway of her small apartment, hand pressed to the wall, listening to his quiet, desperate voice seep through the wood. "Please, Lena, let me explain." Each word trembled with a guilt she hadn't heard from him before, a softness that almost broke her resolve. Almost. On the third knock, she exhaled sharply and pulled the door open. He looked different in the warm hallway light, shoulders slumped, tie loosened, exhaustion carved into the angles of his face. For a moment, he didn't speak. He just stared at her belly, at how much she'd grown. His breath hitched. "I should have been here," he whispered. She crossed her arms, holding herself together. "But you weren't." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I know, and I don't expect forgiveness. Just let me tell you everything." She stepped aside. Barely. Just enough for him to enter. The apartment was small, one living room, a kitchenette, and a bedroom separated by a thin door. The heater buzzed in the corner. Adrian's eyes moved slowly, taking in the worn sofa, the stacked prenatal vitamins, the folded baby blankets on the chair. The life she had been building without him. He sat on the edge of the couch as if afraid it might reject him too. She remained standing, letting silence force truth out of him. When he finally looked up, his voice cracked. "The threats started before your father's funeral. I didn't tell you because I thought I could fix it quickly. But then they came back. Harder. They knew things about you, your schedule, where you lived. They said you were leverage. They said if I didn't walk away, they'd make you disappear." Lena felt a chill crawl over her skin. "So you left me to protect me?" "I left you because I panicked," he said, "because I was stupid enough to believe I could handle it alone." His hands trembled slightly. "Leaving you at the funeral was the worst decision of my life. I replay it every night." Her throat tightened. She didn't want to feel compassion, not yet, but seeing him unravel made the anger inside her soften at the edges. Just a little. "You could have trusted me," she said quietly. "I know," he answered, "and I didn't. That's on me." Silence stretched between them. The heater clicked off, leaving the room too still. Lena lowered herself onto the opposite chair, needing distance. "I'm not ready to decide anything," she murmured. "I don't trust you, not yet." "I'll earn it back," he said, voice steady despite the exhaustion. "Whatever it takes." His certainty unsettled her. It wasn't the confident certainty he used to carry like armor. This was different, raw, vulnerable. When he stood to leave, he hesitated at the door. "Can I come with you to your next appointment?" She looked at him, searching his expression for any trace of manipulation. There was none. Only hope he seemed almost afraid to speak aloud. "We'll see," she said. "I'll let you know." That night, after he was gone, she sat on the couch staring at the quiet room. Mara arrived later with takeout boxes and a knowing look. "He came by," she said, settling beside Lena. Lena nodded. "He wants to be involved." "And you?" Mara asked gently. "I don't know." Mara squeezed her hand. "You don't have to know today. Just think about what you want for your children, not what happened to you." Those words lingered long after Mara left. They whispered to her as she lay awake, feeling the twins shift beneath her skin. 2 days later, Lena texted Adrian the appointment time. He replied within seconds. "I'll be there." At the clinic, she expected tension. But when the ultrasound wand touched her stomach and the room filled with 2 steady heartbeats, she caught Adrian wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. He whispered, "Hi, little ones." His voice was so soft, so full of awe, that something in Lena's chest cracked open again. Afterward, he walked her home. Not too close, not too fast, matching her pace like he was relearning how to walk beside her. Outside her door, he hesitated. "Thank you for letting me come." "It's for them," she replied. He nodded, accepting the boundary without flinching. "Anything you need, anything at all, I'm here." And slowly, over the next weeks, he proved it. He stopped sending extravagant gestures and instead showed up for the small things. Carrying groceries up the stairs, fixing the leaky faucet in her kitchen, sitting with her in the waiting room during glucose tests. He never pushed. He never asked for more than she could give. One evening, when she dropped a stack of folded baby clothes and burst into frustrated tears, Adrian knelt beside her and said quietly, "You're not alone anymore, Lena. Not if you don't want to be." And she let him hold her, just for a moment, as the exhaustion and fear drained out of her like water spilling through cupped hands. The trust didn't return all at once. It came in fragments, a shared smile, a small confession, a moment where she didn't flinch when he touched her elbow to steady her. He apologized often, never the same words, never rehearsed. He told her about the nightmares, the guilt, the feeling of being hunted. She told him about the nights she ate crackers for dinner because she couldn't afford anything else. The months she talked to the babies alone in the dark because she was afraid they would enter a world without their father. They rebuilt not through grand moments but through honesty. Messy, slow, imperfect honesty. One rainy morning, as they walked out of the clinic, Adrian opened the umbrella over her and said, almost to himself, "I'll spend the rest of my life making this right." She didn't reply, but for the first time, the words didn't sting. They settled. Toward the end of her pregnancy, when her steps grew shaky and her breath shorter, Adrian was always within reach. Mara, too, stayed, close, braiding Lena's hair before appointments, helping pack the hospital bag, teasing Adrian whenever he hovered too anxiously. On the night the contractions began, Lena whispered through the pain, "Call him." And when he rushed into the room, breathless and terrified, she took his hand without hesitation. It wasn't forgiveness, not fully, not yet. But it was something softer, something ready, something almost whole. As the hours passed and the twins prepared to enter the world, a fragile peace settled around them, a peace built from broken pieces, slowly, carefully rearranged into something new. And when the final contraction hit and Lena felt her body surrender to the moment, she gripped Adrian's hand and realized, whatever came next, they were stepping into it together. The twins arrived in a storm, lightning splitting the night sky, rain racing down hospital windows like the world itself was holding its breath. Lena clutched Adrian's hand so tightly he never once tried to pull away. Mara stood on her other side, whispering encouragement in a steady rhythm, her voice somehow carving calm into the chaos. And then, in two trembling releases, cries filled the room, sharp, fragile, impossibly alive. Lena's head fell back against the pillow, tears slipping sideways into her hair. The doctor placed the babies against her chest, two warm bundles blinking up at a world they'd just entered. Adrian's face crumpled completely. He reached out, hands shaking, brushing a fingertip across the tiny fist that opened and closed as if gripping his entire heart. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." For the first time, Lena believed him, not because of the words, but because of the way his whole body leaned into that moment. Unarmored, open, undone. Mara wiped her eyes with the back of her sleeve, laughing through a sniff. "They're perfect," she said. And they were. Two miracles born out of a storm neither parent had thought they'd survive. The following days blurred into late-night feedings and soft beeping monitors, into nurses adjusting blankets and Adrian pacing the floor with the baby tucked against his chest. He barely slept. He barely sat. He moved with a quiet reverence, as if every breath the twins took steadied something broken inside him. When the birth certificates arrived, he didn't hesitate. He signed his name with a clarity that left Lena's throat tight. He made calls, lawyers, board members, security specialists, cutting ties with the people who once controlled him, restructuring the company so no threat could ever cast a shadow over his children again. There was no grand announcement, no press release, just a man determined to repair what he'd nearly destroyed. Mara visited every evening after her shifts, bringing food she insisted was barely edible but made with love. She held the babies with practiced gentleness, rocking them while Lena rested. One night, as she swayed near, the window with the tiniest twin asleep on her shoulder, Adrian approached her with an envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "A scholarship," he said. "Full tuition, books, housing." Mara stared at him as if unsure whether to laugh or cry. "Adrian, no, I can't accept that." "It's not charity," he said. "It's a thank you." She shook her head stubbornly. "I'll take it, but I'm paying it back someday." A slow smile pulled at Adrian's lips. "I know you will." Seeing them like that, two people who had once been strangers now sharing a bond forged through crisis, made Lena feel something warm settle in her chest. Family, she realized, wasn't always blood. Sometimes it was the people who chose to stay when the world turned upside down. Weeks later, after the babies were home and the apartment was filled with soft coos and tiny socks that never stayed paired, Lena felt a pull she had been quietly avoiding. One calm afternoon, she asked Adrian, "Can we visit him?" He didn't have to ask who she meant. He simply nodded, gathered the twins' diaper bag, and followed her to the car. The cemetery was nothing like the day she'd last stood there. The sun was warm, the grass freshly cut, the air still enough to hear birds hidden in the trees. Lena carried one twin. Adrian carried the other. Mara walked beside them with flowers she insisted on bringing, though she kept her distance, letting Lena take the lead. They stopped at her father's grave. Lena knelt slowly, placing her free hand on the cool stone. She didn't cry this time. The ache was still there, but it wasn't sharp. It was softer, like something finally laid to rest. "I wish you could meet them," she whispered. "I think you'd love them." Adrian crouched beside her, shifting the baby in his arms. "I'll spend every day trying to honor what you lost," he said quietly, "and what we have now." She looked at him, not the Adrian she once knew, but the man he had become through fear, mistakes, and redemption. He wasn't perfect. Neither was she. But the moment felt full, steady, like the beginning of something grounded in truth instead of illusion. He reached for her hand, waiting for permission instead of assuming it. She let him take it. The warmth of his fingers around hers wasn't a promise. It was a presence. Solid, real, chosen. As they stood, the sunlight caught the edges of the headstone, turning it a soft gold. The cemetery no longer felt like the place where everything had fallen apart. It felt like a place where something had quietly begun again. On the walk back to the car, the twins babbled softly in their carriers. Mara teased Adrian about his careful driving before they'd even left the parking lot. Lena leaned her head against the window, watching trees blur past, her reflection faint beside the babies. The weight she had carried for months, fear, betrayal, loneliness, drifted away like breath on glass. Not gone, but released. And in its place rose something delicate, something steady. A future not built on perfect choices, but on the courage to face the broken ones. The story didn't end there, not really. But for the first time, Lena felt like her life was no longer something happening to her. It was something she was walking toward, one quiet moment at a time, surrounded by the people who stayed. And that, she realized, was enough to begin again.